Victoria III's new dev diary number 12 is about Treasury. It's about money, how money is managed. And the main difference is that you won't have a lump sum of money. You will have some kind of a halfway dynamic system. There is the equivalent of the lump sum, but it's a little bit more state-bound, a little bit more dynamic. We'll see. So you won't need a special lump sum to build buildings. You can build all the buildings that you want. So you have all the money that you want as a state, but you will have consequences. So that's the difference. Let's get into the details. So in most games, money tends to accumulate for a specific goal until you have enough of it to achieve that specific goal. You might want to build a building that costs 100 money. Monthly income is 10 money. You must wait 10 months to accumulate the 100 money. They want to get away from that system. And I think that's a good mechanic, because this is how it roughly works in states. But there's some limitations. You'll see. So at the end of every in-game week, your country's income and expenses are tallied up, and the result is then applied to your gold reserve or national debt. So if you have a big surplus, it gets added to the gold reserves. The gold reserves are just reserves. They don't bring you anything. They're like a bank. So they prevent that you have to pay debt. So on the other hand, they don't have like anything positive for you. So they're just a pile that's sitting there for safety. And that's all. And you can see how the Treasury works here. As you can see, Treasury income is poll taxes, consumption taxes, dividends taxes, minting, so basically printing money, or in that case, making the coins, diplomatic pacts, and money from the investment fund. Then we have national expenses, goods for government buildings, government wages, goods for military buildings, military wages, and new construction. That here. So you can build as much new construction as you want, but you will have consequences for that. As you can see, the gold reserve is your country's national stockpile of cash. If you're free of debt, any money that is left over in the weekly budget after expenses are subtracted is used to increase the gold reserve. If your expenses exceed your income, this money is taken out of the gold reserve to balance the books. It's never bad in itself to have a sizable gold reserve, but each country has a gold reserve limit, which is a soft cap, over which each surplus pound has diminishing returns on the gold reserve. That's something I see a little bit as critical, because why would you have a cap on the gold reserve? Gold is really easy to store. You could have a huge amount of money in gold, and it wouldn't take much room, even for a small country. But this is how it works. They think the rest is wasted. So if you have an enormous stockpile of gold, a surplus of 10k may only increase your stockpile by as little as 2k, meaning that you simply wasted the rest of your money. Hence, a country that finds its gold reserves filling up may want to consider finding a way to reinvest some of that money to avoid such wastage. So there's a limit to how much you can prepare for bad times. And that is a soft cap on the gold reserves. And you can see here, that's an example for that. In that country, I think it's Spain, right? You have current reserves of 1.74 million, which is definitely a sizable sum. Looking at these numbers, like you get 32k per month or something. So the gold reserve limit, though, is 1.5 million. Your balance of 32.4k buys you the equivalent of only 23.7k worth of gold. So you can increase it to a part, maybe to 2 million, but after that it becomes ridiculously bad to do that. So you should use other methods of preparation for bad times than just storing gold. Maybe build armies or something like that. That will waste gold, but it prepares you for bad times too. So what if you're running a deficit and your gold reserve has all been tapped? This is when debt comes into play. Beyond that point, each pound spent in excess of your income will result in automatically taking on debt. Well, this may sound like something that you should avoid at all costs. It's not necessarily true. Of course, if you're in a bad war, you need these soldiers, or you will lose it all, right? So you have to take loans, as were taken in nearly all kinds of wars over the planet, all the time at war times. So interest rates in Victoria 3 are though relatively low because it's a station debt, a state debt. Now, state debts always have, compared to like privates or even corporations, have low debt because the state will always pay its debts. If the state cannot pay its debts, then it doesn't matter which kind of interest rate is there. Then the state will be broken down. Well, there's relatively few examples of states actually going bankrupt. There has always been other solutions like mass inflation, a lot of minting, things like that. So you can get out of that. And so long as you avoid hitting your debt ceiling, so there's a debt ceiling, growing your economy through deficit spending can actually be a very valid strategy. This is because the increase in revenues from minting and taxation may very well end up exceeding the interest payments, not to mention the benefits constructing new industries can have for your population. This is how economy is done in many states now. And who you want to know who buys these loans. It's usually banks that buy the loans, but also private people that want to invest. That want to invest in a currency. So it's very easy, for example, for a country like the United States, that is said to be probably one of the most indestructible countries in the whole world. So they can give out loans and loans and loans because everybody believes they will not break down and will be able to pay their loans. And if they give out the loans at nearly 0% interest, then it really doesn't really matter for them. It doesn't really matter. So they don't really have a debt ceiling anymore. The debt ceiling, unlike the gold reserve, is not a soft cap. Once you hit the debt ceiling, your country will be in default, which is a terrible state to be in, and can only be recovered from if you manage to slash your expenses enough to put your weekly expenses back in the black, or if another country steps in and takes a debt, which can have its own undesirable outcomes for you. But more on that later. It's also possible to simply declare bankruptcy, but because the money you are borrowing against is actually the cash reserves of your country's buildings, which is actually what determines the size of your debt ceiling, this will have immensely negative consequences for your domestic industry. So you have the debt ceiling and you can increase it by the number of buildings that you have there. So the question is, do these buildings also increase like the gold ceiling? So can you also store gold in there? We'll see. Then there's an example, Britain. Even though Britain has taken on several millions pounds of debt, this isn't too much of an issue. Their advanced economy allows them a high debt ceiling, and the interest payments is only a small fraction of their spending. Let's see, so they have several millions of debt, as you can see here. I think that's 2 million of debt. Their credit limit is 8 million. The investment pool is 76,000. They have an interest rate, as you can see here, of 10%, which means they would have to pay 200k per year, probably, if that works that way, to cover the debt, which is quite a high number, but still they can afford it because of the high credit limit. As you can see here, urban centers, for example, textile mills, livestock ranches, coal mines, rye farms, that all adds to the debt ceiling quite a lot. And there's even tea plantations, 25k, let's not forget the tea plantations. Principals 2 million, as you can see here. Again, so that's the domestic loans. Now, when there's something that's called domestic loans, there will also be foreign loans. I'm pretty sure of that. To wrap up the debt diary, there are main forms of income and expenditures. This is by no means an exhaustive list. So this is a teaser of some forms of income and expenses taxes and salaries. You also have a level setting where you can, for example, squeeze more taxes out of your population at the cost of reduced legitimacy and increased radicalization. So if you're really in trouble, you can do that and get you in even more trouble, probably. As you can see here, a massive hike of the tax level to the highest level in that example is a surefire way to both raise money and create political radicals. As you can see here, you have a very, very high level of tax, 60% for lower, 30% for middle, and 15% for the upper strata. Leads to -10 government legitimacy and 50% more radicals from standard of living decreases. They're probably coming from the lower strata, right? Wow. Predicted revenue 224K. Change in revenue plus 74.8K. So if you put that tax thumbscrew in, then you will pay for it in problems. But maybe you can handle the problems, and then it's maybe a good way to get out of debt. As you can see, you have income taxes, poll taxes, consumption taxes, dividends taxes, minting, money from the investment fund. Sweden is calling, right? Sweden has that investment fund that pays a lot of dividends also for its people. Diplomatic pacts, so they have additional, like they get tribute or something, or maybe trade, and additional income, whatever that is. And then you have the national expenses that count against that. New construction, in that case nothing. Government wages 77.5, goods for government buildings another 30K roughly. Military wages and goods for military buildings. So that's really simple, while you have a lot of income sources. And there's more types that we can see here. Main types of income, not an exhaustive list. Minting. Of course, you can basically print money, particularly those have it easy who have domestic gold fields. But it is in itself insufficient for funding anything but the most minimalist of governments. Income taxes. So a certain percentage of the wages paid to workers in buildings is paid to the government. Poll taxes, per capita taxation, where a fixed sum of money is collected on each member of the workforce, is very regressive. They collect the same amount regardless of income. So would be comparable if, like, Jeff Bezos paid only $500 in taxes per month, just as you, that you have an income of $2,000, you would also pay 500 taxes per month. So, I mean, yeah. So, Jeff Bezos surely pays more taxes than you. I hope. Land taxes, a special type of poll taxes that are only collected on certain types of pops, such as peasants. So the peasants have some land for sustainable farming, and this type of poll tax is collected from them. Basically, it's their it's their enterprise tax, if you want so. Consumption taxes, a tax that is levied directly on a specific good that is consumed by pops. Some examples for that are luxury goods. Usually there's a high tax on luxury goods because they are not necessary. And then there's other goods, there's a little bit lower consumption tax. Like in Germany, we have a consumption tax of usually 19%. So everything that you buy, like, for example, you buy a new smartphone, that has 19% consumption tax. If you buy that for your enterprise, you don't have to pay the consumption tax. Because it's not a consumption, in that case it's an investment. So if you buy food, for example, it only has a 7% consumption tax because it's relatively necessary. But not all food is necessary, and so to get money, there's also like a consumption tax on salad. And there's also a limited consumption tax on something like you go to a restaurant. And you have there not 90% consumption tax because it's necessary for you to eat, right? So you have, I think, a 12% tax on the consumption there. So it's a method to kind of steer the behavior of the people is consumption taxes. And it's also, of course, income. And you can steer very clearly there by a consumption tax system which kinds of people should pay which kinds of taxes, because there's of course a certain consumption for every class of citizens, right? And citizens with very low income won't buy luxury goods a lot. And on the other hand, right, they will pay most of what they own for food. So you can see whom you tax also through the consumption tax, and you can reward and disincentivize behavior. Then you have dividend taxes. Taxes applied to dividends paid to POPs with an ownership stake in a building. Tends to be a very progressive form of taxation, as usually only well-to-do POPs have ownership of buildings. For example, there's an dividend tax in Germany. I think it's 25% or something. So if you have like stocks in Coca-Cola and they pay a dividend, then from that dividend 25% goes to the German state if you're a German citizen. Or if you have Daimler-Benz stocks, same way. Then there's tariffs. Tariffs are something that we plan to have in the game as a way to profit from goods being exported from your market, but not ready to talk about exactly how this will work yet. Yeah, tariffs were a big thing back then, so I hope they will integrate them. Tariffs can still be a big thing, and it works the same as the consumption tax, just for country-to-country trade. So you can say, like, for example, you're at the United States and you say, I don't want these pesky chickens from China. Well, they can come, but they are so polluted. We want an extra tax on that, so that they don't kill our home farming chicken meat industry or something like that. And so you put a tariff on them. That's a kind of tax on export and import. Main types of expenses now. Government wages, the salary cost of employing POPs in your government buildings, such as government administrations and ports. Then government goods, the material costs for your government buildings, for example, the paper needed by government administrations. Then military wages, the salary costs of POPs serving in army and navy. Military goods, various goods needed for your army and navy, such as small arms for barracks, for example, or maybe horses. Subsidies, the cost of subsidizing specific buildings to ensure they remain competitive. Like you could subsidize the coal industry or something like that. Like it's done today. Interest. The cost of making interest payments on your loans, if you have any. Now we've seen that Great Britain was very well off there. And they paid a little bit of interest. Construction. The cost of constructing new buildings, both in goods required for the method of construction and wages paid to POPs working in the construction industry. So you'll have a fixed price combined from goods and wages paid to POPs. And I think that's a very cool system to combine that. And it's cool that we get like an insight into the inner workings of that system. I still think that like the soft cap on the Treasury that you can like have there is maybe a little bit over the top, because it's not like that you get paid in interest for the number of gold reserves you have. So that's already a disadvantage. The question is, should you limit that, or should you allow people to have huge amounts of gold just to prepare for something? But of course they want to incentivize action in a game, and for that they want a cost on inaction to make the players play the game. And your cost of inaction is not only that you don't get whatever you would get in interest there, but it should probably represent like people in your country saying, hey, what's going on there? We need to spend we are such a rich country, we can afford this and that. And it's just in the human nature, especially in the politicians' nature in states, not to prepare for bad times too much. They want to let the good times roll, right? And if you have the gold reserves too high, then this will come up. And I think this is what the waste represents. That country will start spending on things they don't need. Like if someone is very rich, they will also start spending on things that are really ridiculous. Like, for example, instead of like going on like leasing a big yacht for a holiday, they will just buy the yacht and it will lay there in the harbor for 11 months and 2 weeks every year, and the other 2 to 3 weeks they will be on holiday on that yacht. But in that case, it's a really, really big waste, a big waste of money and a big waste of resources. And things like that will probably happen in the States. So that's, I think, what this represents. So what do you like best about this? I think I like best that there's a system that you can get behind that will have consequences. And that it's more to real estate spending, similar to real estate spending, than other systems where you have to accumulate a lump sum and then pay that lump sum. That was often done in the Middle Ages, but this is Victoria. It's a modern state system, and modern states do that. They just invest, regardless of how much money they really have. They just invest, and then they will have debts, or they will have gold reserves, or maybe even both. So thank you for watching, and happy gaming to you. This is Immanuel Can signing out. Have a great time until then, and happy gaming.